can. Not yet. All right, so Steve, thank you for taking time out. What time is it right now for you?
It is 8:19 a.m.
This is better than years past, is that correct?
It's past my bedtime. I mean, it's early.
So,
yeah, this is not as early as the past, as I recall.
Yeah, in the past we've done this at 7:30 our time, which was 6:30 his time.
Yeah.
Now he looks like he's awake and had 2 cups of coffee. So
we call this progress.
He's in San Diego. You're at home, right? San Diego?
Yes. Yeah, I'm in San Diego.
All right. So these students, a majority of these students have read your book, and we just got done with Greater Than Yourself, which was also, a great read, and they enjoyed it. We had a good conversation, and sorry, notes from the office. So, so if you want to go into that a little bit, but before you kind of even get into that, do you want to kind of explain a little bit of your background, how you got to this point, and then just share a little bit. This is a leadership class. Just share a little bit about your thoughts and ideas around leadership. Students have questions later, but if you want to just kind of jump into some of your thoughts around leadership, around GTY, around your background, and that kind of thing.
Sure. First of all, good morning, guys.
Morning.
Great. It's great to see you. I wish I was there in person, but this is the next best thing. So, I've been in the field of what we call leadership development, primarily in the business world. I've been doing that for almost 30 years now in some form or another. And I have, I've had a really remarkable kind of a career because it's given me the opportunity to meet lots of people in all kinds of businesses and all kinds of industries and see, from company to company, from organization to organization, to see what do they have in common and how are they different. And maybe it's not surprising, but they have a lot more in common than they do, there's more in common than they have differences. And I think there's a pretty good reason for that, because virtually every company that I've ever worked with is populated by, what do you call them? Human beings. And when you put people together, there are certain universal truths that emerge. And in trying to capture that, that's really formed my body of work and what I teach people about leadership and what I believe leadership is based on my experience, right? So the things you read about in Greater Than Yourself are not things that I made up in a vacuum. They're based on a lot of years of a lot of experience with a lot of people, meeting great leaders, meeting terrible leaders, and learning as much as I can from both. And really there are 2 things that leadership boils down to in my view. One is that fundamentally leadership is an act of love. And it's about our willingness to extend ourselves to the people that we work with, to the people that we serve, to our colleagues, to our customers, just like we do just like we extend ourselves to our friends and our family. There's no difference between going to work and being at home in the sense of our fundamental human nature. We do different things. We play different roles. The relationships are different. I get it. But we're still fundamentally human, and love is the most powerful experience in the human journey. So why not use it in the way that we lead? And that's what I've been on my soapbox about for quite some time. Greater Than Yourself is a very specific, it's a very specific application of that. It's a very specific behavior that shows that extension of the heart from one human being to another. And it's based on a very simple observation that because you read the book, but I'll just paraphrase it like this. The greatest leaders that I've met in my work and in my life don't call attention to their own greatness. They don't shine the spotlight on themselves. Instead, what they do is they invest themselves in making other people greater than themselves. And that's how they become the greatest. And it's a bit of a paradox, actually. The way that I can become one of the greatest leaders is by making others greater than myself. So GTY is an exploration of that, and it's a call to action, right? I mean, what I'm asking you to do is to take that approach yourself right now. find somebody to be your, as you know, what I call it, what do I call it? A GTY project. I know that some people probably don't like being called a project, but that's, that's the nature of that relationship. Somebody you can invest yourself in order to make them more successful, more fulfilled, more joyful, have greater things happen in their lives, maybe even than you do. So that's my point of view. I'd love to hear your questions, your comments, your emotional outbursts. And anything goes. Your responses to the book. What do you got for me?
Hey, Steve, real quick before we jump into that, what are you involved with today? So you wrote GTY 2006, 7, something like that, and now you do a lot of speaking. You do a lot of writing still.
Yeah.
What is it that you're kind of involved with today? What does it look like for you?
Yeah, well, we have a lot going on. So I'm working on 2 new books right now. One is with how many of you know the band Twisted Sister? Did you ever raise your hands if you've heard of Twisted Sister? Raise your hands if you ever heard the song "We're Not Gonna Take It." That's Twisted Sister. So the founder of Twisted Sister is J.J. French. He's the guitarist, the founder of the band, and actually the manager of the band too. So he and I are writing actually his story together. It's his story. I'm helping him write it. It's going to be great. And I'm working on another book called Love is Just Damn Good Business. And we're doing a lot of really cool work with companies to help them change their cultures, to bring the LEAP framework, love, energy, audacity, and proof is the framework that I teach, to bring that into their companies and help them do business in a way that operationalizes love, essentially. So we got a lot of projects going on. I'm writing a column for Inc.com and speaking and running around the country and doing that kind of a thing. So yeah, it's kind of busy around here. You haven't written a book in a while. What is it like? What are you trying to say?
What is it like? And I'm assuming the J.J. French type story is going to be very different than your typical fable, leadership fable.
Yeah.
So what is that? What's that style like? How's that going to be different than GTY style?
Yeah, the J.J. French Twisted Sister story is different in that it's not my story. It's his. And I'm just he's an amazing storyteller, and he has fantastic stories with really great lessons attached to them. So really all I'm doing is making that live on the page. So it really actually reads like a parable, except it's not a parable. It's his story, and it's told, he's telling it in first person, right? And the other book, the love book, is actually not a parable either. So these next couple of books will not be in the same kind of genre as the previous 3. So I'm just trying something a little bit different. And I do have ideas for the next novel or parable as well. I just have not gotten to it yet.
I got tons of questions, but I'm going to try to open it up here. I'll interject some of my questions. Who has a question right now that they'd like to share with Steve? Anybody have a question right now? Okay, Charlie. Stand up so we can see you. Because right now we look like dark blobs on the screen. It looks like.
And look at the lens, not the screen. So there you go.
So one of the things I loved about Greater Than Yourself was the plot of the story. It didn't read like your standard leadership book or business book, but more like a novel. So I'm just wondering, what that creative process was like. Was it difficult dealing with the whole GTY principle to put it in that story?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. All the Radical Leap, the Radical Edge, and Greater Than Yourself are my 3 books so far, and they're all written like novels. And it's honestly the reason I started doing that way back with Leap was because it just seemed like it would be a lot more fun to write a book like that as opposed to a typical business book. So really, it was about the creative process for me. I've always been a writer. I've enjoyed the process. I like making stuff up, which you can do with a novel, make up characters and have them talk to each other and all that. So it is a creative process. And it's challenging because it's like writing 2 books. So when you're writing a novel, I would assume, because I've never just written a straight ahead novel, all you're concerned about is are you creating the great story, and do the characters make sense, and is it all working as a story? With a business novel, there's that element, but then there's also the lesson that's being taught, right? So it's thinking through the framework and the model and what is it that the story needs to convey. So the story becomes like a delivery system for the message, not the other way around. So it's challenging, but it's also a lot of fun. And the challenge part is probably why, as Mr. Halsey just said, I haven't written a book in a while. Thank you very much. Because it's kind of, even though I've done it 3 times already, it's still freaking intimidating, man, to sit down and stare at a screen and say, okay, now I got to do a story and a lesson. And it's just, it's kind of easy to push to the back burner, which I've done too much. So it is a creative process, and it is a lot of fun, and it's challenging, and that's just the way it is. And there's nothing wrong with it being challenging and creative at the same time. The two most often go hand in hand.
Nice. Another question? Yeah, Macy, stand up so you can see.
Okay. This really isn't a question about GTY, but it's a good judge of character, I guess. What is your favorite movie? My favorite movie? Yeah. Very important.
Oh man, I have. There's gonna be a certain pattern here. It's hard to answer because favorite in terms of what the experience, what brings me joy, and all that. So I'm just going to give you with my initial impulse. It's got to be. I'll tell you what's near the top would be Young Frankenstein.
And why?
Because it's. Have you guys ever seen Young Frankenstein? Yeah, I didn't think so. I think it's kind of a generational thing. It's a Mel Brooks film. It represents. I'll tell you why. It represents the brilliant comedy of my youth. That's why. It brings me back to a time when I was your age. Back when I was your age, Mel Brooks was the great comic genius of the day, and Young Frankenstein is. He filmed it in black and white. It had a different approach to it. It's just brilliantly written. It's hilarious. It's completely out of the box, and I guess it makes me nostalgic.
Nice. What else? Kate, Matt, you want to stand up?
Since you wrote GTY,
You got to speak up. Can't hear you.
how many GTY projects have you taken part in since you wrote Greater Than Yourself?
Can you repeat it for me? How many GTY projects? What?
So she's coming up to stay closer to the speaker. Here she comes. Keep going. There you go.
Okay.
Since you wrote Greater Than Yourself, how many GTY projects have you taken part in?
Great question. So there've been You want to sing a song while you're there? No? Okay. So the GTY project that I wrote about in the book, as you know, is Tommy Spalding, who's done extraordinarily well. And in fact, I'm going to be going to one of his retreats here in just a few weeks, actually. And then, I would put JJ French in that category of GTY project. He is an incredibly accomplished guy, but he had never really done the speaker thing and the author thing before. So in a similar way that I helped Tommy way back in the beginning, I've been helping JJ with the speaking side of things. In fact, I gave him his speaking debut at one of my events, and he was just amazing. And then there's probably 2 or 3 others, young entrepreneurs that I've been working with lately. So it's been, for me, it's no more than 1 or 2 at a time, because I consider GTY to be a very focused kind of endeavor and a really significant relationship. Now, having said that, and this was really the whole purpose of the GTY project, actually. by focusing on one or two people, what I find in my own experience, and I think what you'll find in yours, is that it highlights what it feels like to really help somebody. And it makes it easier to do more of that for more people. So even though I don't have a whole bunch of GTY projects, I do take a GTY approach in virtually every significant relationship that I have in business. So, you know, when I was writing the book, I had two choices. One was I could ask people to be very greater than yourself oriented in the way that they work with everybody, right? Which is a big thing to ask. And I didn't feel right doing it because I don't believe that I have I don't know what it is, capacity maybe to be a GTY person with everybody that I know. It seems like it's a huge, I aspire to it. I'd love to be able to tell you that I do, but I've gotten better at it. And I didn't feel like that gave me the right to ask other people to do it. So I figured, well, why don't we start with one person? Just start with one person and take it from there. And the idea is that we can all do that. I can do that. You can do that. Doesn't matter what your age or experience is. Everybody can take on at least one GTY project, one person that you can really invest yourself in. But the point is not just to help that person, but to give yourself the experience of what that feels like, so it makes it easier to do that for more and more people as time goes on. So that's been my experience. I've just gotten better at taking that approach with a lot more people, and I think it's fair to say that I feel really good about that.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
All right, another question from you guys. Who's got a question right now? Okay.
Have you personally seen the philosophy of GTY implemented in like a business?
Have I seen it in business?
Yeah, like implemented in a business.
Yeah.
Like how YSC, how like, you know, from the top it was maybe implemented down. Have you ever seen that type of environment?
No. Next question. No, I'm kidding. So here's there's a couple of different answers to that. I have not seen it implemented as an organizational standard, as this is the way we do things in our business or in our enterprise. I have a couple of companies that I work with who are really close to that, really close to it. One of them is what they've been doing is focusing primarily on the LEAP framework, which is the foundation for GTY: love, energy, audacity, and proof. So there's a company in Seattle called OAC Services that was just rated the #2 best place to work in the state of Washington. Pretty cool. There's a company in Jacksonville, Florida called Trailer Bridge, was just rated #1 best place to work in the city of Jacksonville. There's a company in Australia called Incentra, which is rated #8 best place to work in the country of Australia. And they're really close to this. What they've been doing is really implementing love, energy, audacity, and proof in the way that they do business. And I know Trailer Bridge focuses a lot on greater than yourself. So yeah, so the answer is yes, I'm seeing it start to happen. And the other side of that is that this was, GTY was based on my observation of really amazing leaders that I've met in companies over the years, right? So when I take individual cases in all kinds of companies, I noticed that pattern that really the greatest leaders were the ones who did that. They had that love for the people they worked with to the point where they really invested in others in order to raise them up. So this idea of creating a GTY culture, that this is the norm, this is the way we do business, we help each other, we're getting close to it. Now I'm sure there are companies out there that are very close to that, if not already there. I'm just not aware of them as of yet. But with the companies that I've worked with and know really well, they're making great strides. And one of the ways you could tell is the reputation that you have in the workplace for being a great place to work, right? If everybody wants to work at your place of business, there's a pretty good chance that it's because it's a rewarding, fulfilling, supportive place where I'm going to learn and grow and become much more successful than I am today, as well as make a contribution to the company itself. So there's a lot of opportunity there, and I look forward to you guys getting into the full-time workplace after you graduate and after you get your careers going, so you can. I think there's a good chance that you guys will be the first generation to really make this the norm. And that's my hope for you and for us.
Awesome. Another question? Steve, I have a question for you real quick. Stories are a big part of your life.
Yeah.
And, being able to tell stories well. Stories, how would you say stories help a leader to influence their followers? How do stories play a role in that influencing piece of leadership?
Yeah, stories are a real powerful mode of communication, and it's obviously it's I don't know, maybe it's not obvious, but the fact is it's the oldest form of communication that we have. We've been telling stories since we sat around a campfire, not a campfire, sat around the cooking fire outside of our caves, that long ago. So stories are really powerful because they do a couple of things. They are experiential, right? When you hear a great story, you kind of put yourself into the story. That's just a natural thing that happens. And they become powerful living examples of an underlying principle, right? So when I tell you that honesty is important, if I say that to you as a leader, that we should be honest, that's a concept. We have the idea of honesty, we have our own interpretation of what that is. But when I tell you a story about what honesty means to me and what it looks like, then it makes it clear what I mean by that principle. And it gives us something to aspire to and live up to. So storytelling in organizations is critical because it's a chance to illustrate the values that we say are important. It's a chance to be really clear about the standards that we expect from people, and they're inspiring. Stories are inspiring. People love to hear stories about themselves. So one of the powerful leadership tools, and I've seen this demonstrated by many leaders over the years, is their ability to tell great stories about the people on their team, about the people that work for them. And it serves that purpose that I just mentioned about illustrating a principle about what's really important. It's also a tremendous form of recognition for the person about whom I'm telling the story. And it's just a great skill to develop. So, that's one of the reasons I like to literally use a story in a book form. But if you notice, just about every book that you read about, let's say business principles is going to have lots of stories in it. Stories about people, stories about companies to illustrate the underlying principle they're trying to teach in the book. So it's a great skill to develop. And anything you could do to practice the art of storytelling will serve you incredibly well in everything that you do.
Hey, just a quick follow-up to that question. Tell us a little bit about J.J. French and his story, almost as a preview of the book in a sense, but he's got a crazy story. I think I was at that conference when he's.
You were, yeah, that's right.
And it was really neat to hear his story, but just kind of share a little bit of, most of us have maybe heard of Twisted Sister, but what is his story like, and why is it powerful?
Yeah, so his story really is quite quite something, and he's a collector of stories. I mean, just the stories from his life, which I'm learning, through writing this book, are amazing. He's like a story magnet, the guy. But the overall story of his music career and the story of Twisted Sister is, he started a band in the 70s. When he was in high school, and they, this was the heyday of rock and roll, and he wanted to be a rock and roll star, and Twisted Sister went through, I think, somewhere around 11 different versions of the band. People died, they've disappeared, they got fired, whatever. And the conclusion that JJ came to in the early days of the business, and this is going to surprise you, was that drugs have no place in the business of rock and roll. And because he saw too much damage from drugs and alcohol, which he participated in quite a bit in the early days, and he gave it all up. And in fact, when he put together the band that went on to become successful and famous, including Dee Snider, who's the famous front man for the band, they were completely drug free, totally straight band. And they just couldn't tell anybody because they were afraid it would ruin their reputation. But their focus was on being great. So they've played 9,000 shows, but the story of their success was not a story of putting a band together and achieving success. It was failure after failure after failure, getting close to success and having everything melt down. And then finally it hit. They had these huge albums, platinum and gold records, and then they failed again. The band fell apart, and they pulled it back together one more time to do a fundraiser for the police and firemen after 9/11, and the word got out that Twisted Sister was back, and they just took off, and they finished their career. They did their farewell tour last summer. It was their 40th year. At the peak of their career, more successful than they'd ever been. So that's the overall story. The stories, the details of it are really amazing and really entertaining and really funny, and I just would not do them justice. But it's definitely a story of perseverance, I'll tell you that.
40 years in music industry is pretty incredible.
Yeah.
All right, questions from the students. Who's got a question? You guys all have questions. Who wants to share one?
Oh, right.
Okay.
Hi again. So this is an actual question about writing. How do you overcome writer's block?
What a great question. Does anybody there have an answer to that? I would like to ask you that question. Yeah, I don't know that I have a formula for it other than, for me, the writer's block isn't so much what happens when I sit down to write. It's what happens that keeps me from sitting down to write. So it's different for different people. So for me, it's really kind of sheer willpower to say, I am sitting down right now to write. And then once I get going, it flows a little more easily. Some days it goes better than others, but I think it's just a matter of moving. It's moving the fingers on the keyboard, moving the hand across the page with the pen, and sometimes it's about switching up the method. So some days, if I'm feeling a little stuck, I'll write on my keyboard with the computer. Other days, I'll get out a pad of paper and a nice pen, and just feeling the scratch of the ink on the paper stimulates something else in my brain. So there are a lot of ways to do it, but really what it comes down to is you just do it. You just have to do it, and not worry about worry over every word and phrase and paragraph. Just get it down on paper as much as you can. By the way, I'm lecturing myself right now, just so you know. But I will tell you guys, for any of you that have any impulse at all to write, which I did when I was in high school, I did have that impulse to write, and I used to actually enjoy writing my essays for English class. They were always kind of snarky and sarcastic. But if you have any impulse at all to write, I highly recommend and encourage you to follow that impulse. I don't think there's any skill that will serve you better than the ability to put your thoughts, feelings, point of view on paper in a way that other people can understand it. that will serve you no matter what you do. If you end up being a writer, it obviously serves you. But no matter what you do, when you go into business, if you're an entrepreneur, you work for somebody else, you go into the nonprofit sector, your volunteer work, your ability to write well and to capture your thoughts and ideas and communicate those to people in a way that they can actually hear you and feel what you're saying is a skill that it seems to me fewer and fewer people have. And the upside to that is if you can really get that down, it's going to give you a tremendous advantage, and greatly increase the likelihood of accomplishing whatever it is that you want to accomplish in your life, your career, your family, whatever endeavor you have. Hey, Brian, how much more time do we have? There's a quick story I wanted to tell, if I could.
Yeah, no, you can share it. We got time.
How much time do we have?
I mean, we technically could have another 55 minutes, but we don't need to talk that long. So it's more up to your time.
Okay. All right. So I want to tell you the story, and then if there's any last questions, we'll wrap it up with that. And I want to share this with you because you guys read the book, or most of you did. And there's something that happened. Well, I'll just tell you the story. So in the book, it revolves around that guitar, right? It starts with the guitar. I find a guitar in the store. I bring it home. There's a note kind of hidden in the guitar case from a teacher to a student, which sends me off on this quest to find out who the owner of that guitar was and the recipient of that note and all of that. So let me tell you my own story. So that's a fictional story. That's a story that I made up, although I do own that guitar, that 1959 Gibson ES 330. But back in 1977, I bought my first really good guitar, an acoustic guitar. It was called a Gurian, Gurian. They don't exist anymore. That company went out of business a long time ago, but they were really kind of popular at the time, really nice guitars. I bought it for, I don't even remember what I paid for it initially, but I bought it in 1977, and that's when I was playing a lot of music. That's when I wanted to be a musician. I started writing songs back then and performing with that guitar. Then I went to college. That guitar came with me to college. I wrote some of my, actually, there are songs that I still play today, 40 years later, that I wrote on that guitar. Then in 1981, I graduated college. I got married right away. I married into my daughter, Angelica. I had a son a year later. So I was 24 years old. I had 2 kids. And I was trying to be a musician. And I learned that apparently feeding kids and being a musician, those two didn't line up so well, at least not for me. So I made a decision to stop pursuing a music career. And I needed money. So I had to sell my guitar. So I sold, I think this was in 1981 or 1982, I sold my beloved Gurian guitar for $280 to a woman named Leslie. And I remember vividly watching Leslie walk out of my apartment and down the hall carrying my guitar. And it was like watching the death of a dream. That's what it felt like. And it was tough, man. I mean, I gave up playing music at all for a while because it just felt so painful. Not to mention the fact that I didn't really have a guitar anymore. And but over the years, I started to play again and integrated it back into my life. And I never pursued it as a profession. But I found my other passion, which you guys know about, in this world of leadership development, and music just became kind of a thing for me, just part of my life, but not my livelihood, which is fine. And then about 6 years ago, out of nowhere, I got an email one day from a woman named Leslie. And she said, she's something like, I saw it was a long email, and it was like, I saw your name on a webinar, and I went to your website, and I saw what you're doing, and it's really cool stuff, and I'm really happy for you, and I live in Texas now, and all my kids are grown, and I still have that Gurian guitar you sold me all those years ago, and my heart just about ripped out of my chest, and I composed myself. And I sat down at the keyboard and I emailed Leslie back. It's like, well, nice to hear from you. I live in San Diego. My kids are grown too. And blah, blah, blah. And by the way, if there's any chance at all you'd be willing to sell that guitar back to me, I would love to have it. And I hit send and I stared at the screen and I waited. And within minutes, she emailed me back. And here's what she said. She said, I'm paraphrasing this, but it was pretty close to word for word. She said, I still remember the look on your face when I walked out of your apartment carrying that guitar. And I've never been able to play it without thinking of that. So I don't play it. It sits in my closet. She said, as I recall, you sold me that guitar for $280. So I'll sell it to you for $280. And I got it back. Now, that's a pretty cool story, don't you think? Okay, now here's the thing. That happened after I wrote Greater Than Yourself.
Wow.
So I wrote that story first, and then this happened. Now, I don't know what that means, or if it means anything at all, but there's something there. There's something to be said for focusing your attention on what you wanted, because honestly, I have many times over the years, the part that I didn't tell you, many times over the years, I fantasized that one day I would find Leslie and she would still have my guitar and I would get it back. But it was a fantasy because that stuff doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen. And yet it did. So I don't know what that means, other than to suggest to you guys that the power of your intention and the power of your imagination and the power of your thoughts are pretty significant. They're very significant. And what you choose to imagine, what you choose to dream, what you choose to focus your creative energy on can, and I believe will, manifest itself in your life in some very surprising ways. So keep focused on what you want, and be prepared for it to shift. And that's fine too, but you will create great things in your life by allowing yourself to dream and pursue the things that are really important to you.
Do you still play that? Do you play that often? That guitar, you take it out and...
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I do. I've been playing it quite a bit lately, and last weekend I actually went into the recording studio and recorded 6 songs, some of which I wrote on that guitar 40 years ago. I never recorded them in this way with the kind of talent that I recorded it with, the people that were helping me on that. And I used that guitar in that recording session. So it's kind of come full circle. I'll make sure you guys get the music when it's done. It's got to be mixed and mastered and all that. But it turned out great.
So you got a new book coming out, another new book, and an album coming out.
That's right. That's right. Yep. Yeah, I'm a rock star. Yep. You betcha. Because, making an album just means it's going to be a hit, because, that's the way it works. No, actually, what's interesting is I really have no designs on doing anything with that music other than sharing it with people. And I wanted to capture it. I wanted to capture it for my friends and for my kids and for myself. It's not like putting a book out where it's, you publish the book, you get it out there, and then you do whatever you can to make sure that it sells. We're not going to do that with this album, but I'll be really thrilled to share it with you when it's done.
Awesome. All right, we got maybe a couple more questions. Okay, Maddie, Chloe, do you have a question? Yeah. Okay, Maddie, you want to? Okay, she's coming up again because she has She's a softer voice. So she's coming.
Hey, look at the lens instead of the screen.
Oh, the screen.
To your right.
Still kind of tilted. That's all right.
Computer screen. See the computer screen. Or
There you go. Hey.
Okay. All right. What inspired you to write again after 10 years?
These are really painful questions. Has it been 10 years? I guess it has been. Holy crap.
I think it's 11, actually, Steve. I think it's 11.
Yeah, thanks. By the way, I'll answer that question, but by the way, just so you know, Greater Than Yourself is going to be, we're actually re-releasing the book in spring of 2018 with obviously we're not changing the book itself because it's a novel, but a new introduction, new story at the end. I'm going to tell that Gurian guitar story as kind of an epilogue, and we're going to re-release it. So I'll be putting a lot more attention on that. What inspired me to write after all this time? I'm always inspired to write, but honestly, what got me going this time was, for me, writing has always been completely a solo act. And these two books that I'm working on now are both collaborations. So I'm working with JJ on his book, and I'm working with my friend Stephen Caldwell, who's a great writer, on the Love is Just Damn Good Business book. So that kind of got me out of my funk, as it were, to actually work with somebody else on a book, to collaborate with somebody, not feeling the weight of the whole thing on my shoulders. So my hope is that will start, and I'm feeling it already, it's starting a certain feeling of momentum that will carry over into the next, getting the next novel started sometime in the next year or two. I think is when that's going to happen. Because there's a lot of work in doing a business book in particular, because the book has to be written, then it's got to be published, and then it has to be marketed, and it's a huge full-time endeavor. So really, what inspired me to out of my writing desert was collaboration. Trying it that way, it's been fun. I mean, it's still kind of an experiment for me, because you got to find your rhythm with each person. It's different, what the expectations are and who writes what, and how does that whole process work. But so far, it seems to be working pretty well. Thank you for reminding me that I haven't.
One more question. Tess, you got a question? Okay, Jake.
Okay. So in this class, we talk a lot about what things in a leader are most effective or are best for a leader. What traits do you think are best for a leader?
Yeah, thank you. It's a huge question, and it's been a while since I've done the search, but if you do a search on Amazon for books on leadership, it's like tens of thousands of books. And there just can't be tens of thousands of versions of that answer, or tens of thousands of answers to that question. So there are some universal truths that emerge. For me, it comes down to essentially four things, and I mentioned them a couple of times in our session here this morning. That the greatest leaders that I've seen, the people that I call extreme leaders, they cultivate love, they generate energy, they inspire audacity, and they provide proof. So what that means is, we've talked about love already. GTY is an expression of that. They cultivate love for each other, for the team, for the company, for the cause, for the values, for the principles they stand for the customers that they serve. So they're bringing their heart fully into their work and encouraging other people to do the same. They generate energy. So energy is it's enthusiasm. It's the juice for what we're doing. It's the desire to really do great things. So a great leader puts more energy into their environment than they take out. A terrible leader sucks the life out of a place. A great leader or an extreme leader energizes it. People feel better when that person is around. Audacity is, I define it as a bold and blatant disregard for normal constraints. So it's that outside of the box, audacious mindset that says we can do extraordinary things. And it's all about changing the world for the better. So a bold and blatant disregard for normal constraints in order to change the world for the better. That's audacity. So extreme leaders, the best leaders that I know of, they inspire that spirit. They inspire audacity, not just in themselves, but in the people around them. They inspire that desire and intent to really change things for the better, no matter what we're told we cannot do, the so-called normal constraints that are put on us. And finally, they prove themselves. So, it's easy to talk a good game. It's easy to say the right words, and for some people, it's easy to stand up on a table and give a rousing speech. But fundamentally, we have to prove that we mean what we say. And we prove it through the results that we get, for one thing, but we also prove it through our own actions, through our own behavior, through the consistency between the words that come out of our mouths and the behaviors that people see us engage in. So I'm not just going to tell you that I love you. I'm going to prove it. I'm not just going to tell you that I think integrity is important, as every person says, but I'm going to prove it to you through my actions. So you can look at me and see a walking, talking, living, breathing example of the very things that I'm asking you to do. So that to me are those are, and there are subtleties and nuances to all this, but those are the four fundamental elements of extreme leadership: love, energy, audacity, and proof. And these things make a huge difference on a one-to-one basis, in a team, and also throughout an entire company from a cultural perspective, as I've mentioned a couple of times this morning.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Great question. These are all great questions, guys.
Any other questions right now that you guys have? You don't get to talk to Steve very often. He's not going to video chat with you each week or anything, but do you want to have a question? Do you have another one?
I'm not going to stand up. Stand up like
Okay, so Macy's she has another question. She doesn't want to stand up because for some reason.
my legs.
Okay, what do you got?
Look over here.
What's your favorite Beatles song?
What makes you think I have one?
That's fair. If not, why?
No, I do. I'm actually a Beatles fan. I don't know that I could tell you what my favorite Beatles song is. I love so many of them. I'll tell you what my favorite album of theirs is. It's the White Album.
Yep, that's my
Yeah,
dad.
that is my favorite. There's a lot of great songs on there.
Awesome. Any other questions before we allow him to go back to his writing? Hey, Dave's got one. Stand up though. Stand up.
We play like songs on the ukulele or guitar for like a minute.
You want to lay down on the guitar? On a guitar, you want to bust out one of your songs?
I don't have any of my guitars up here. I'll tell you what I'll do. I will. I'll take a rain check on that. Let's find another time, and I'll call on you guys and play you a couple of songs. How's that sound?
All right, sound good.
You get signed albums.
Any? Macy wants a signed album. So as soon as you get that signed album.
I'll email you my address.
Any other questions before we head out? All right. Steve just wanted to say thank you. Can you guys thank him for coming in?
Thank you, guys.
And good luck with your books and stuff. When do you expect those to be released, published? Do you think?
Yeah, the publication date for the book that is currently known as, the working title is called Twisted Business, will be the end of 2018. So right around Christmas time, 2018.
Okay. That's crazy. How long does it take to that whole entire process? Typically for a book, start to finish, what does that take? How long does that take?
Well, it could take a couple of years. It could take. It depends on the publisher, and it depends on Yeah, it depends on a number of things. I've got the manuscript has to be done by the end of the year, beginning of next, and then it's got to be put into production and all of that. So it could take a while. With some other publishers, like with Random House, where Greater Than Yourself is published, that whole process is closer to 2 years. Like if I submit a manuscript today, it's not going to come out until, if they accept it, it's not going to come out until 2019 sometime.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, crazy. Unless you're like Nicholas Sparks and you publish books every 2 months or something like that.
Yeah. I don't know how these guys do it.
All right.
Stephen King, man. Stephen King.
Yeah.
Just
All
sits
right.
down and he writes for 8 hours a day. Just like me.
Right. All right. So thanks, Steve, and
Thank
have
you,
a great
guys.
night, and we'll talk to you later.
Have a great day.
All right. Thanks.